Right, welcome to my home, which I've shared for 54 years with my late husband, who passed away 4 years ago. And he was wonderful, Alan Bloom. All right. We moved in 69, which makes 54 years. Previous to that, we had an apartment in Chalk Farm, and this is how we became members of South Hempstead to begin with. Chalk Farm, then South Hempstead, then was we had a tent. And then when they started building, we moved across the road to an apartment, across the road from the shul. Same place where it's now, but slightly different. So I've really seen it from the beginning. Now, before I do anything else, I would like to say that the concept is Yom Hashoa, the concept of 7 million, including 1.5 million children, is something which I cannot comprehend. Therefore, when it comes to Yom Hashoa or any Yisrael, my mind goes to my dear father, who I last saw on the 28th of October, 1938, when he was deported back to Poland. He came from Poland, together with 17 or 18,000 other Poles, as the Germans were afraid that once they attack Poland, Poland won't let the Jews go back. So they made sure to send them back to Poland before they started the war. And it's the last time I saw my father. Now, I light a candle in his memory. To go back to the Shoah, 7 million and 1,500 children, 1,500,000 children include my own family, my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and their children, and not even talking about children they would have had, but at the time. So my father represents them all, and I lit a candle in his memory. My thoughts go not only to my father, but I go to the whole communities which were actually destroyed, which didn't, Jewish communities who don't exist anymore, such as the Judea of Rhodes. I don't know if you heard of the Judea of Rhodes, an island, a Greek island, where there's just one survivor now, and perhaps one or two. And she is the most incredible woman. She related her story and the story of the community to somebody called where's my page? Oh, yeah. Her name was Stella Levi, and she said it's the search for a lost world, the Judea of Rhodes, related to Michael Frank, who wrote 100 Saturdays, the most incredible book I've ever read. Her final message was, writing is remembering, reading is remembering, naming is remembering. Therefore, I lit the candle in the name of my beloved late father, Joseph Ben Yaakov Schütz. Now, to give you a little bit of background, my father and my mother came. I was born in Berlin, on the 18th of January 1930, which makes me 93 if your mathematics aren't very strong. And I was 9 years old when we left Berlin. I was the second daughter of a religious couple, but a little bit perhaps a fraction above United Synagogue standard. But my father didn't didn't have a beard. He shaved with a cream, and my mother didn't wear a sheitel. But we had a very traditional Jewish life. And I was very lucky because my sister, I was the second child, my sister Ruth, who wrote a wonderful book I'll talk about later, she was 5 years older. And because of her, I learned to read very early in life. She taught me, she loved teaching. And I even read at the bottom of our street in Berlin, there was I don't know what it's called, a reading, like a
library,
like for, they showed the Stürmer, the Nazi newspaper, a display panel. And I read, Jews are dirty, Jews are thieves, Jews are this, Jews are that. I said, but we're not dirty, we're not thieves. So that's began my knowledge of what's going on. Then I heard the marching, the what you call them, the Nazis marching down our street, calling, blood will flow from the knives of the Jewish blood will flow from our knives, whatever. So I was very much aware of what was going on, even at a very young age. And then, of course, when my father was deported, that sort of put that was the culmination of what I knew. It was, in fact, the precursor to the Kristallnacht, because one of the people deported with my father, one of the 17 or 18,000, was the father of a young man who was so upset about it that he killed a German officer, and this gave them the pretext for Kristallnacht. After my father was deported, my mother was was told that she has to vacate. We had a shop. My father was, as a young boy in Poland, he learned to repair shoes. But he didn't, that's not what he did. In our shop, he was selling bales of leather. And anything, all the articles needed by shoemakers, but not only by shoe repairers, but by people, because people were so poor that they repaired their own shoes. Incidentally, we lived in the red part of Berlin, the so-called what's it called, communist part of Berlin. And my father was highly regarded because he was very meticulous. He said if somebody came and said, I would like leather from he said, this leather is no good for you. He would tell them, this is not suitable for you, or whatever. He only closed the shop on Shabbat and to take me across the road to my school, because my school was just across the road from where we lived. We lived on the second floor of this. Our Pesach dishes was a big apartment block, about 6, 7 floors. Our Pesach dishes were in the loft, and no such thing as a lift. My mother used to go up to the 7th floor to pick up to bring down all the dishes. And one of the first memories I have of Pesach at home is carp swimming in the bath, live carp. Yeah. So then my mother made wash for her brother. Her brother had come to Berlin before, older brother. I don't know if any of you have heard of Susie Bradfield. It was Susie Bradfield's, I'm sorry, what did I say? Yes, Susie Bradfield's father and mother came to England. And Susie, I don't know if you heard of her, she was actually, because her oldest brother was sent to the yeshiva in England. This is how they all came to England, and found a family in Gateshead, a Jewish family who were absolutely wonderful. And they said, when it came to it, they said, Paula and Susie, my cousins, could come on the Kindertransport. They were their foster parents going to be. And they kept in touch with them forever. My uncle being here, he said, you know, my mother has to come out as well. She was on her own by then. So he tried to find a family, an English family, where she could be a domestic, right? But before that, she was told that she has to close the shop and hand it over to a non-Jew by the 31st of December. And she and Ruth, my sister, older sister, were up all night trying to retain a few things so that they can sell them afterwards privately, because they got nothing for she got nothing for the shop. So and then Ruth was so, I don't know where she took it from, but she's so aware of everything. And she said, we have to get out of Berlin. We have to get out of Germany. So an older cousin of ours had gone on Aliyah, on youth Aliyah. And she was 2 years older than Ruth. And Ruth was very, very stylistically inclined. So she said, she went to the youth Aliyah offices in Berlin and said, can I get on it? She said, no, you have to come back next year. You're too young. They only took me at 15 and she was 14. So then she went to the Kindertransport people. They said, we can't help you. You still got your mother here. And also we have to look after our own German children first, because we're not German, we were Polacks, you know. Although we were both of us born in Berlin, that didn't count. So, but while she was there, she overheard girls talking about going on a train to Belgium on the 22nd of February 1939. And she came back to my mother and said, Mutti, I've got an idea. We used to call her Mutti, my mother. I have an idea. Buy us tickets for England. We'll pretend to be going to England, but we'll mingle with the children going to Belgium. And this is the only way we can get out of Berlin. That's Betty and I and Ruth. Bonya was 2 then, yeah, but before then, I must say that 5 years after I was born, my younger sister was born. But she was just 3 years old then, or 4 years old. So my mother agreed, which is incredible, because I'm sure that if my father had been there, he would not have let us go. Not that he didn't, he would have been too worried for us. And not that she wasn't worried, but she had the courage and incredible courage to say yes. So she got us ready, and she took us to the station on the 22nd of February, 1939. I remember it so clearly. And said goodbye to us. And somehow managed, eventually the train started moving, and we just sat down. But then Ruth said, let's walk and find the girls, because it was a general train. It wasn't just for the Kindertransport. Let's find the girls who are going on the Kindertransport, to mingle with them. And somehow or other, my mother managed to follow the train and to wave to us again from the next station. I don't know how she did it. Unbelievable. But so we left, and eventually we came to Aachen, the border between Belgium and Germany and Belgium. But in Cologne and Köln, all the girls were issued with identity things around their neck, we didn't get one because we weren't part of the group. So when we got to the Belgian border, one of the security guards came on board and said, where are your tickets? I said, we haven't got one. So my first French word I learned was get off, descendez. And Ruth, again, being so incredibly, I don't know where she took it from. She said, no, sit still, sit still. Well, I thought, they said, I asked her, what did she say? Because she was already on her first year of secondary school, so she'd learned some French. And she said, sit, sit, sit. And eventually, about half an hour later, the train started. The same guard came on board and said, continue. That was my second word of French. We arrived in Belgium to a not very warm welcome, because the Belgium only had allowed there's a debate about it, 800, not 10,000, 800, yes, 800 children for Kindertransport. And we were two more. And so the committee, we were the committee of the Jewish committee in Brussels, said, oh, we'll have to send you to the Salvation Army. But we knew what the Salvation Army, even his army, we knew. I don't know why. So we both started crying. But luckily, amongst the girls who hadn't yet been collected, there was one, Ruth, my sister, knew from school. She was a bit younger, but her family came a bit later, and the mother said, why are you crying? I mean, she saw us crying. And said, well, because they want to send us to the Salvation Army. So she said, come home with us. And we spent 2 weeks in their beautiful villa on the outskirts of Brussels called Uccle. I was very, very happy. We tried for years to find out what happened to this family. About maybe 12 years ago, we discovered that the whole family had escaped to America and survived. The parents were no longer alive, but I'm still in contact with their eldest daughter. And so we were very happy because they were really hospitable. But then they took us to there was a hostel for girls who didn't have family in Belgium. And they took us there, and we spent a year there. It was led by a young couple called Alex and Elke Frank, who Alex had been to Palestine to study agriculture. A very strong communist inclination, but they were a wonderful couple. They really, but he had strange ideas. He said no, that comes later about food, but I'll speak about that later. Anyway, they when war broke out, when the German invaded Belgium on the 10th of May 1940, Alex had been called up because he was Belgian. Elke said, look, got in touch with the committee, said, you have to leave. We got 4 days before we left the house. The home we were in was called Home General Bernard. And as we left, we left with what we could wear, you know, we didn't, she told us to put on several, it was in May, so it was a bit difficult to put on several jackets and several things. And as we were leaving, we saw the local population coming in to see what they could find. And we got to Brussels. Brussels was in complete chaos because the Belgians remembered the First World War and what the Germans did to them in the First World War. So we eventually got to the station, but were joined by a group of boys, 50 boys we were 50, more or less 50 girls, 50 boys from equivalent from the hostel in Brussels. And they never forgave us. They said, you bought clothes, we bought food. But how long does food for 100 children last? Not forever. So it took us 4 days to get to, somehow or other, they managed to get a what you call it, a goods train, you know, one carriage for the boys and one for the girls. All right, that's all we had. And as I said, the boys said, you bought food, we bought food, you brought. But on the way, it took us 4 days to get to the southeast France. And on the way, whenever we stopped at the station, the local pop bought some, you know, milk or something, not a great deal, but we weren't starving, all right? At one of the stations, incidentally, then we saw soldiers coming back from the English had, you know, in Dunkirk, soldiers coming back from the war, wounded soldiers, etc. And what's I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Yes, the train was bombed on the way, and but we were lucky. And one thing which I'll never forget is at one of the stations, my sister with a friend got off to go to the toilet because we had no toilet facilities. So I thought I'd never see her again. The train started, but she managed to get back. And as a farewell present, my mother had given me a beautiful, I always loved leather. I love from my father's shop, I loved the smell of leather. So she gave me a beautiful shoulder bag, and I had to use it as a toilet. That was my greatest, that devastated me really, because I was so proud of this shoulder bag. We eventually, after 4 days and 4 nights, we arrived in a small village in the southeast of France called Serre-Parnayou. It had a total of 100 inhabitants. But the local squire had put at our disposal 2 barns. Now, these barns were adjoining. There was nothing in them, but I never knew why there were 2 adjoining barns. Apparently, he had intended to create an orphanage there. So we slept on straw, and in order to be able to eat and to sit down, the boys went to the local church to bring in some what you call them, pews and tables. Unfortunately, the winter of 1940-41 was the hardest in the whole 20s, 30s. It was absolutely terrible. And Alex, who had by then time been demobbed, had to trudge through snow with some of the older boys to find food for us, because we were there suddenly 100 inhabitants. We were 100 plus. So conditions were very hard. I was never hungry, but I was absolutely freezing, and I'm freezing to this day. Not today, because I couldn't get warm, and we had no running water. We had no toilets. We had the boys dug some latrines outside, and I had to get up, but I don't know how many times a night to go out to the latrines, and that was my problem. Food was no problem, but in their wisdom, the people in charge of us in Belgium had decided to, I forgot this. Before we left for France, sorry, that's very important. They had decided that I was too small, and I should, I should be fed up and sent to the country. So the week they chose for this thing to give me give me more appetite, and was the week of Pesach, and I refused to eat until the local community sent in a box of matzot. But that's going back to Belgium. Now in France, conditions were absolutely horrendous, because we were in these 2 barns in this coldest winter of the century, and there was a pump opposite where we were, our barns, froze. We slept on straw. We all had 1 blanket, and I was always cold. I was just cold. My sister got warm the minute she got into bed. She was warm, but it's cold which made me miserable, not lack of food. Anyway, about a year after that, one of the members of the committee of the Jewish refugee committee in Belgium heard about it. She'd also come to France, heard about us, and said, her husband had some contact with the Red Cross, Secours aux Enfants. It's called the Red Cross Help to Children, yes, who took care of not only Jewish, but of orphanages of children whose parents had been sent back to sent by the Germans for forced labor, whatever. So this Madame Goldstein, she said, you must, her husband contacted the Red Cross, and they said, you must find these children some other accommodation. They can't stay another year. My sister had boils on her legs. I can't tell you. It was absolutely horrendous. And so they found us a disused chateau, which hadn't been occupied for 40 years, called Chateau d'Ailly, on the southwest. We were southeast, on the southwest side of Toulouse, about an hour from Toulouse. And there we had beds. We also had, there was nothing in this chateau. Again, no running water. They had the toilets had the same problem as the toilets. And but there was previously the I suppose the most treasured room of the chateau, which had parquet flooring and a piano, believe it or not. And one of the boys of the group had studied, was a student or had learned piano, and another one was a violinist and brought his violin with him from Germany or from Belgium, wherever they came from. So culturally, we were well looked after, because I learned to appreciate, classical music. And one of the women was singing leader, but I'm not a great leader, sort of, leaders are not for me, but that's a personal thing. My thing which helped me tremendously was that I loved to read, and I lost myself in books. And whenever I felt down, I started reading, and I read the only book I couldn't get hold of, because one, I'm going forward a little bit. The Red Cross sent two educators. One was a Swiss woman called Rosalie Neff, who had been working for Albert Schweitzer in La Lorraine, was saving the locals. And she had no idea how to treat young adolescents, and but she made us, we were organized. We organized ourselves. We were divided into three groups: the oldest, the moyenne, the middle group, and the small ones. Now, the small ones went to the local school, but somehow I managed to get in. There's a little bit of protection for my sister. I managed to get into the middle one because I was just about the same, that age. And any French, and I learned, any French I know now, which I've used in my professional life, was due to Alex Frank's mother, who was a teacher. She joined us eventually, and she taught me French, and she taught French and history, and mathematics is not my greatest subject. Completely the opposite of Alan, who was an engineer, and I was good with languages, and he was good with figures. And luckily for me, when I started working with Alan, that I've gone from pounds, shillings, and pence to decimal.
Nice.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to work. But one of the boys taught us mathematics, and we put on plays for the Swiss. Used to come on their public holiday on Christmas. We put on plays, and we enjoyed it. I enjoyed acting, and as I said, when I felt miserable, it was surrounded. Chateau Lehy was in a beautiful countryside. I found somewhere to sit under a tree or something and read. And I had a chance to read Gone with the Wind, which I hadn't been able to get to in Belgium, in France. I'm sorry, in Belgium. It was too much in demand, so I managed to read it there. So how can I say? We really self-governed ourselves. And everything was all right. We managed somehow. Life was going on. In the morning we were learning, in the afternoon we were helping. I helped in the kitchen, and I've got a photo of myself sitting by a stove in the kitchen with my nose in the kitchen. And or we helped, went to the local river. We were near on the river to wash our clothes, etc. And we self-governed ourselves. And it was extremely well. I know it went extremely well. I can't believe it how well it was. We had 2 or 3 adults with us. That's all, for 100 boys and girls, and there were 1 or 2 problems, but not many. And this was good until September 42, when suddenly, early one morning, we were surrounded by a group of released, the local, not Germans, but the local
community
police, who arrested all our boys and girls over 15 years of age. And Ruth wasn't with us at the time because she couldn't stand the life was under Wesley. That was a bit not for her. So she found Swiss farmers, very low-class Swiss farmers, who had a farm about 2 hours from the chateau. And she got a job there to help them. And they liked her very much. But on the day when they arrested all the boys and girls over 15, the police knew, because she was registered, as she was working for these people, who were called, funnily enough, Schmutz, which is dirt in German. But so they took her away. She didn't know that our boys and girls from Lehy had been arrested, and they found each other in the Camp de Vernay, which was a camp established for Spaniards who were anti-Franco Spaniards who had worked in the against Franco, and eventually the Germans converted it to take Jews. They were there they were there for about 4 days, when they were told to get ready for transportation to Drancy, which was the camp from which Jews, French Jews were sent to Auschwitz. But in the meantime, to do her justice, Rosalie Neff, the one who looked after us, went to the command of the camp and said, "You have to release my children." He said they wouldn't hear of it, but they nearly threatened her that if you don't keep still, we'll take you as well. So she got in touch with her superior, somebody from the Red Cross in Toulouse, who contacted the highest official of the Vichy government and said, if you don't release the youngsters from Lahi, we will stop all, he took it upon himself, will stop all work because they were looking after orphanages, not only one or two were Jewish, that's all in France. So they got a bit worried, they released them. But they came back. Obviously, we were absolutely, we were so happy to see them back, but they felt they couldn't stay for long because it wouldn't last for long. I mean, they could have come back any day to rearrest us and to take us away. So Ruth, together with her best friend, decided to leave for Annecy in order to get into Switzerland over the border. But in the meantime, the Swiss government had decided to send back anybody over 15. All right. So they had no chance of getting into Switzerland. And we lost one or two of our boys and girls who were caught by the Germans because the Swiss had sent them back. So on the 31st of December, 1942, Ruth, with a friend, decided to leave the chateau and to try and make contact through Eugen Lehrer, who had supplied us with books. One of the Swiss who was more understanding of what we needed, etc. They were given the address of somebody not in Toulouse, I've forgotten now, it doesn't matter, who could help them to obtain, because they had no papers. They needed food coupons, etc. So, but when they got to this place where they spent quite a long time, the person they were supposed to. Are you running out of time?
No.
The person who was supposed to.
Yeah, we're good.
We're fine.
They were supposed to had been arrested. He survived. They discovered later on he got to Israel and they made contact. Ruth then, what's the name of this town she worked in? What's the name of the town she worked in? It annoys me. Big town, beautiful.
Nice, Lyon.
Lyon, they went to Lyon, but near Lyon.
Ellie, if you can hear me, can you just mute everybody else except for us, please? There's some background noise. Sorry, Bessie.
Dijon?
No.
It
It doesn't matter. I'll come
It'll
to
come
back
to you
to me in a
later.
minute. Anyway, they were accommodated in a convent. They managed to find somewhere to sleep and somewhere to, and then they made their way to Annemasse, and but they knew that they wouldn't try to get into Switzerland, so they went back to.
Kali's going to find it.
Grenoble.
Grenoble.
Ah,
Thank you. Thank you, Kali. They went then to Grenoble. And in Grenoble, they Ruth eventually left to find work with some farmers who treated her abominably, absolutely terribly. And she didn't stay there very long. And because she said, well, you're they didn't know she was Jewish, but they treated her badly. And so she went to Grenoble, and there by chance, walking around Grenoble one day, she met somebody who looked somehow Jewish, or she looked familiar. So they started talking, and apparently she was Jewish. She said, would you like to join us? They ran the resistance in Grenoble, but their object was not to kill Germans, but their object was to save as many of the French Jewish children as they could, because the parents weren't like my mother. They didn't want to let them go. They said, you must let them go. And Ruth could be persuasive. And she obtained false papers. And she did all sorts of incredible. You have to read her book. Her book is A Girl Called Renee. It's well worth reading. You've read it. Yeah. So well, where was I?
Joining the resistance.
Yes. So she said, I'll join you. And her job was to get false papers and to speak to parents and to go to the all sorts, to be an interpreter, etc. And their object was to save children and send them across to Switzerland. And her good friend, did it a few times. And the last time Ruth said, let me go. She said, no, I want to do it for the last time. And she did what she was caught by the Germans. She was tortured, but did not give away her comrades. And she's now interned in Yad Vashem. She's now there. So then Ruth heard about a child of under one who had been the Gestapo. They'd been informed that the Gestapo would collect her. Her parents had left her in an orphanage, hoping that she would be safe. And but somehow the Gestapo found out that there was this child. So Ruth dressed up as a Gestapo officer. Yeah. And in a good Berliner dialect, she said, I've come to collect Bonja. My younger sister was born. But she's no problem. We love her. She's such a good child. This matron didn't want to release her. So Ruth threatened the matron, if you don't release her, we'll close this orphanage. So they released her. Ruth took her to somebody they knew who looked after her, and she survived. And many years after the war, there was a knock on, when Ruth was already on the kibbutz, there was a knock on the door of the kibbutz, and somebody said, just three Corinne, just three Corinne. That's you're my second mother. came alive the second time. Corinne had found Ruth through the person they were supposed to meet in Lyon when they arrived, who had been deported but managed to get out and managed to get to Israel. So I've met Corinne. She was very happy, but she was unhappily married twice. But the third time, now she's very happily married and settled. Now, that was an incredible thing to do under the noses of the Gestapo. So her friends said, you can't stay here. They'll come and look for you. But she said, I've got to stay long enough to make sure that Betty gets away. Because I've been helping other children, but Betty is still naive. So she contacted Eugen Lehrer again, the one who got us the books, and asked him to meet her with me in Annecy. Lovely. I don't know if you've been to Annecy. It's a lovely town by the lake, and I couldn't say goodbye to my friends in Lily because I wasn't supposed to tell anybody I was leaving. And Eugen Lehrer put me on his bicycle and took me to the nearest railway station. And we got onto the train, and I can't remember, it was a night journey. But the following morning, when we arrived in Annecy, the station was full of Germans, so I was a bit nervous. But he said, don't worry, you're going to another hospital of the Red Cross, there's no problem. So I met Ruth again, and it was lovely, but she said, we can't stay long together because you're leaving for Switzerland tonight, together with the parents of one of her colleagues of the Resistance, who were also going with a daughter and a boy. Daughter was my age, the boy was younger. And then we had an ice cream, and then she had to leave. I didn't want to go, but I realized no way could I stay. So we was together with the parents and the two children, went to the home of the guide who was supposed to take us across to Switzerland. Now, he told us we can't go tonight because last night they caught a lot of refugees. The Germans are very, very alert this time. You'll have to leave, at least you stay another day. So we spent the day with the guard, and very early the next morning, he took us to the border, and he said you have to cross 3 barbed wire fences. I can help you across the first 2. The third one, you're on your own. I can't go further. So he said, but you've got to go, when you come to the third one, I think he said you have to go straight ahead, or he said, you have to go to the left. It doesn't matter, you have to go to the left. Anyway, we went straight ahead, and we heard German voices. There was the French part of Switzerland, so shouldn't have been any Germans there. So we knew that was wrong. So we came back and went the other way and found the third barbed wire fence, which we climbed across, and immediately on the other side, some Swiss border guards came and said, we watched you, you nearly walked into the hands of the Germans, but we couldn't do anything about it. So then they took us, by that time it was about 6 in the morning, and they took us to their nearest command post. They started in an interrogation. They wanted to know where I came from. I said, I don't know. How did you come here? I don't know. Because I couldn't say. He said, all I remember saying is that, oh yes, I said, how did you come? I said, I asked myself, because the reception we received, he didn't even offer us a hot drink. I mean, we were children, and 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, not even, they took us to the nearest camp, which was opposite the Palais des Nations in Geneva, very posh, but not, we weren't posh. It was surrounded, we saw when we arrived, it was surrounded by guards with dogs. So I said, you know, I said to myself, I said to somebody, I'll be so dangerous, refugees, that they have to guard us with dogs. You know, what are we going to do? So I was in this camp for quite a while before they sent us to another camp. One was in the mountains. That was lovely because it was more. This one in near Geneva was called the Bout du Monde, the end of the world, which is true. There was nothing, and there were no facilities for. I had nothing. I came with what I was wearing. So in order to wear my clothes, I had to stay in bed to, you know, I had nothing. And also, there was absolutely no help from the way we were organized in France. There was nothing. Nobody, the older people didn't, even the people I came with, the family I came with, didn't take the slightest notice of me. And then I was supposed, we all had good, what's it called, a godmothers, yes. In the Red Cross had arranged for us. Each child had a godmother in Switzerland. My godmother, some of them took in their children. My didn't want to know, but she did send me sardines. Every tins of sardines, and every week a parcel arrived, or once a month, I can't remember, with sardines. And so sardine is not my favorite food at the moment, but I learned to eat it.
Bessie, can I ask, how old were you by then?
By then I was, when I crossed into Switzerland, was in the I was 12.
12, yeah.
Yes, I was 12.
So young to be out in the world.
Well,
As
that
a
was
child.
for us, you know.
Your choice.
Then from the last camp, the Red Cross sent us to found families for us. And they sent me to a family in Schaffhausen, which is on the border with Switzerland and with Germany. And the nearest German town was Rheinhausen. Now in Rheinhausen, there was a shul. In Schaffhausen, there wasn't. So the community used to go to Jewish community in Schaffhausen used to go to Rheinhausen for on Yontif, etc. But what the community in Zurich did, they sent us once a month a rabbi to give us some, because we hadn't had any contact with Jewish rabbis or any form of religion or anything. So we were invited by a local in Schaffhausen, one of the Jewish families, to spend Hanukkah. So we thought, we knew what Hanukkah was. We thought we were going to get at least, I don't know, you know, some biscuits or something all they gave us was one apple each. I remember, well, I don't know. I have no words, you know, they didn't read. Anyway, so the funniest thing was, not funny, but Schaffhausen, being on the border, was bombed by the British. And I'm not sure the British or the Americans, actually. I think the Americans. They thought they were in Germany, and they bombed Switzerland. So I found out what my mother had been under for 6 years, or by that time 5 years, in London, in the Blitz. And I had to report to the police once a month, I think, as a refugee. And eventually I have to go back to this. In 1942, the Home Office contacted my mother to say, well, my mother had been trying to get us to England, to say that if we can get to, Ruth and I can get to Portugal, they will arrange to bring us to England, for which she had to send £60, which was a fortune for her, because she was working in a factory making uniforms. And to us, so they said, if you can get to Portugal, we'll bring you to England. To us, at that time, to get to Portugal was like going to the moon. How could we get to Portugal without papers, without visas, without passports, without anything? On the strength of this, as soon as the war was over, in 1945, my mother reapplied to the Home Office, and they eventually allowed me to come to England. So I was sent a letter to say that I should report on the day I arrived. They would, and I should only bring what I could carry myself. So I laughed because all I had was things I made myself. Actually, the family I lived with, they didn't buy clothes for me. Or they got a few things from the Red Cross, and they got a, here and there. But I made myself a dress, I remember, and so I laughed. I mean, all I could carry myself. So I arrived in England, and my mother met me at the station. It was, what can I say? I can't describe it because, no, before actually, I must tell you something else. Was still in, was in Schaffhausen. A relative of the people I was with in Schaffhausen lived in Bern. Now in Bern, I had a lot of my comrades from Lahi were in Bern. So I managed to make contact again with my people. And in fact, my first boyfriend was called Alex, and he got married the same day, and Anna's second name was Alexander. So, and he got married the same day we got married, funnily enough. Oh yes, I said my parents must have had a premonition that we'd be in England, because they named my birth certificate was Betty was a Y, and in Germany it would have been Betty was an I, and I was very proud of this Y. And also my second name was Blumer. No, they didn't know I was going to marry somebody called Anne Bloom. So how do you explain it? And how did I meet Anne? Because of my French, my knowledge of French, I went to work for a French watch importer who worked in Charing Cross Road. When I arrived, a cousin of my distant cousin sent me to a school to learn English. I picked it up quite quickly, and actually I read the Christmas Carol, Dickens wrote it in shorthand. And I read it better than the local students. And what was I going to say?
How you met?
How you met Alan. On Charing Cross Road, you worked for the watch
Yes,
shop.
so the top building, my boss had the top floor. He didn't own it, he was managing the building. He had the key to the building. And Alan, had been in Israel, as soon as he finished the RAF, he had to do 6 months longer because of the Berlin airlift. He had to stay in, although he wasn't a pilot, he was a radar instructor. He had to stay 6 months longer. And he, as soon as he could, he left for Palestine after he was demobbed. He didn't want to leave the army under a cloud. He had been actually when he arrived, when he was called up, he was the first called up after the war. He had been on Hashoa in Sexted, a farm in here, to train to go to Israel, But he decided he must do his army service. He said, I owe it to them. They saved our lives, the British. His father was British. His grandfather was in England already, on his side, on the Bloom side. On the Boxer side, the others they came a bit later. But he volunteered for Israel. He was in the he was in the Israeli Air Force. And one day he took me, when we were there, he wanted to show where he was in Haifa, where his air base was. And the girl who I think at the border said, she didn't want to know, She said, I just wanted to show my wife where I was during the war. He said, no, just after the war. And he said, no. Before the War of Independence, She said no. Anyway, I said to Alan before he died, I said, did you ever ask me to marry you? He said, I don't remember, and he didn't remember. We just drifted together. I had family in Israel. He had friends in Israel. In fact, he left all his belongings in Israel because he only came back for his brothers, who was 8 years younger or 9 years younger, bar mitzvah. So his friends said to him, would you like to rewire the building? He said yes, to earn a little bit of money whilst I'm here, why not? Can't harm, because he hadn't been working for long before he was called up. So he had to come to me every morning for the key. And every evening he put it back. One day he said to me, would you like to have a coffee? So we went to Soho because our thing was on behind us was Soho. So I always tell everybody that I met Alan in Soho. What came of it, we went to a coffee house and had lovely coffee. But when he came to pay, I realized he had no money on him. So I paid for the first coffee. Right. French saved me. Really. Through French, I made a lot of contacts, and my last job was selling property in the south of France. Alan did all the IT. He taught himself. I had a typewriter, but I had to tell him where to put the accents because my typewriter didn't have accents. But he got fed up. He said, either you become computer literate or give up work. As I had no intention of giving up work, I became computer literate. But he was sitting next to me in the next office, so I always had some help when I needed it. And we had a happy life together. That's all I can say. And unfortunately, we couldn't have children. I couldn't have children because I was apparently I caught tuberculosis in the tubes, either in France or in Switzerland. I'm not sure. I remember I was ill in Switzerland. Excuse me. And but whatever you see here, we chose together. This was our home. We worked from here. We adopted the same children, Nicholas, 3 children. And the first time I knew Alan was well was when he didn't come down one Shabbat, because we always had a open door on Shabbat, a Kiddush club, to you're all invited. The door's open on Shabbat. And when he didn't come down, I knew something was wrong. Hitler, agreed. Well, that's all I can say. And also by living before we moved here, as soon as we got married on the 25th of May 1952. We moved into, before I asked my boss, I was working for a firm of structural engineers. I asked my boss if by chance he knows of any apartments for renting, not for buying, because you had to pay key money for renting in those days. And he said, well, I've got 2. I've got one in Finchley and one in Chalk Farm. Now, Chalk Farm being my mother was still living in Stamford Hill, and my parents-in-law were in Stamford Hill. They both moved to Hendon eventually. So we decided and this is how we became members of South Hampstead. My the first Shabbat was in the hut, not in the hut, was in the, yes, in the hut. And afterwards they started building, and we had to go across the road to a block of flat, to the apartment, to a house. Across the road from where the shul is now. And so the first Shabbat we spent in Southampton. It wasn't called Southampton then. But this is, so I'm a return member of Southampton.
Betty, before we close, what would be your message, especially to young people that are going to be watching this on Yom Hashoa?
Message, I can only repeat what this wonderful woman called Stella Devi said. Writing is remembering. Writing is remembering. Reading is remembering. Naming is remembering. So don't forget people. Name them. So when I lit the candle, I named my father. Because you can't name 6 million, 7 million, and my aunts and uncles and cousins. that's all I can say. Don't hate, and be open to the world. Have an open mind, and that's.
Betty, thank you. I think from the bottom, certainly from the bottom of my heart, really thank you so much.
You're more than
You've
welcome.
not just named, but you've brought us into such a special story. And every time I hear little bits of your story, I learn something new, but I also see what love every time and care and passion you have when you share it. And for sharing it with all of us this evening. It's really a privilege to call you one of my friends.
It's
You
my
have such a
privilege to
joie de
have you
vivre.
here.
And you tell the story as if, yes, and then we went here, and then we went there, and then when we say, well, how old were you? And you were doing all of this when you were 12. And you have such a remarkable love for life.
Gusto.
Yeah, and it's infectious.
Mm.
You know, and the people who bump into you on Shabbat and then come back to shul, they take that joy and that energy, and then they spread it further. So really, thank you so much. I also want to thank Bobby for being on the camera
Thank
and
you
making
so
the Zoom
much,
happen.
yeah.
And I really want to thank the Benot Sharut.
Thank you for setting it up.
Hadar in particular, who was the one who said, Betty's story and this amazing idea of Zikaron BaSalon that's from Israel, that I think has not only allowed people to come into your home tonight and see the special place that you and Alan really built together, the haven that is 33 Fellows Road, but also connect us to the rest of the Jewish community around the world. And what better message on Yom HaShoah than to say, Am Yisrael Chaim, we're all connected in this amazing way through the project. So really, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You helped yourself to the biscuits or anything. Please do.
Betty, do you want to
Yes,
maybe
ma'am.
introduce the book of your sister?
Would you like to
We
show
want
us?
to introduce the book of your sister.
Yeah, my sister's book is called A Girl Called Renee. Now, there's a French translation of it. Where is it? It's on the table. Yeah. It's not called the same because it was printed by the committee of the Chateau Nahi where we were. It's called Ruth and Betty
With a Y.
Deux Sœurs Face or
Ruth and Betty with a Y.
with a Y, of course. Face au nazisme. Deux Sœurs Face au nazisme. That's the French. Now it's also been translated into German. The German is behind you somewhere.
And you also have a chapter in this one, right? Your chapter is at the beginning.
I've got a chapter in the French one. I've got, yeah. That they printed my story as well. The German one has been selling very, very well. They are really, really interested, and I feel it's my duty to write and talk about it as often as I possibly can, and to pass it on to the younger generation. So, you know, to them it's history, unfortunately, but don't forget it. Don't forget it.
You give a very visual and very strong image of your journey, and I'm sure that goes through to young people. You say it in such a lovely, relaxed, informative, young way, and I think we're all very privileged to be sitting here with you, and all the people watching, I'm sure, feel very privileged as well to listen to you.
Privileged to have you here. Happy to have you here. It's only privilege.
Thank you very much.
Please help yourself to some of
Thank you,
biscuits.
Betty. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, Betty.